So I think just so that we're not any later, we'll just start. I'll give my introduction and then we'll introduce all our speakers and get started for this afternoon. So thank you all very much for coming along this afternoon. Sorry if I stop talking, it's just because I'm admitting somebody else and it's dead hard to do both. So good afternoon and welcome to our afternoon session, Keeping People at the Heart. I hope you've enjoyed our plenary session, which included a very inspiring talk from Thang Ling Ling from Singapore. And also congratulations to our winning Excellence Awards winner, to Ryan at Citadel for their fantastic project, and also to Wanda for the work that she does in the Black Isle. So congratulations to them. For those who don't know me, my name is Alison Clyde. I'm the CEO of GWT and I'll be your chair for this session, although I'll not be talking very much because I'll just be handing over. Please use the chat to say hi, pose any questions for the speakers. I know that some of the speakers will be asking questions during. We'll maybe see if we've got a couple of minutes at the end as well. Please do keep yourself muted just to avoid the additional noise. Session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be filmed, please switch off your cameras. During the time when we're asking for questions, it would be lovely to see people so that people can see who we're speaking to. But today we're joined by 3 organisations who are leaders in supporting people living with disabilities and long-term conditions. As time is very short, I'm going to hand over to our first set of speakers, Amanda Jackson, who's the Senior Community Coordinator, and Maxine Dinnes, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Community Engagement Officer, who have joined us from Leonard Cheshire. Maxine and Amanda are going to share their experiences about a recent intergenerational project and their ideas on how to increase intergenerational connections for their participants. Thank you very much. Over to you, Maxine and Amanda.
Thanks, Alison. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, it's my real pleasure. Can everyone hear me okay? Just to check, first of all. Yeah. It's my real pleasure to be here today to introduce Amanda, who is going to share more about her experience with this particular project. So the focus of this session, this short session, is around keeping people at the heart. And what we're going to be sharing with you is our experience, and Amanda's experience of working in partnership with people and different organisations, and sharing her learning from that. And it's very much about planning for involvement that makes a difference. So how Amanda and partners went about capturing that and involving people in how best to capture that. So it's learning from lived experience of intergenerational partnership working and learning in an online community setting. And this is during, as Amanda will highlight, during a very challenging time, obviously with the pandemic. So I'm Maxine Dinnes. I'm Community Engagement Manager for Leonard Cheshire in Scotland, and I'll let Amanda introduce herself.
My name is Amanda Jackson and I'm the Senior Community Coordinator for Scotland. Okay, let's go on.
So we thought we'd just start, just maybe helpful to kind of share a wee bit about what we do as an organisation. So Leonard Cheshire, as you may be aware, is a local to global pan-disability charity. And so we work with people with lived experience of disability, working together with communities to remove barriers and look at how we can work together to remove barriers so that people can live, learn and work as they choose. So it's very much about partnership working and collaboration. So we work with organisations and communities to develop, working together to develop more inclusive communities. And we are a local to global organisation. So we work with lots of different organisations, work with governments and to influence laws and policies to positively affect the lives of disabled people. So our intergenerational working and learning is very much, it absolutely is integral and underpins our inclusive communities work and our inclusive communities approach. And our inclusive communities approach doesn't sit just within one particular initiative or one particular service. It's actually something that is really our ethos. It's the way that we work as an organisation with the interests of people with disabilities and long-term conditions at the centre, at the heart of everything that we do. And it's very much about, you know, working together to develop more inclusive communities where the whole community values its members because of, not despite of, differences, and where everyone feels safe and has an equal voice in shaping that community as well. So people of all different ages and from all different backgrounds are engaged in and contribute to and lead Leonard Cheshire's work across all of our activities. And Amanda's going to go on and just kind of share a wee bit more about that.
Yeah, just before I go on, I've got to direct you to this picture. It was another project I was involved in, but I want to give a bit of context for it. We were doing a bit of a garden project pre-COVID. We didn't know how lucky we had it then, with a care home and a can-do project. And this young gentleman, everybody was given plants and they could plant them anywhere. And this young gentleman stood out for me because he wanted it planted in this planter, which was like away from everyone else. And I said, right, okay, is there a reason why you want it planted there? And he said to me, this is the first that I knew about it. He said, my grandpa's in that room up there, and if I plant it in there, it's higher and you might see it from the ground and it'll come back every year. And I was like, that's pretty special to me. So that picture means a lot to me because he was so proud that he'd thought about that. So yeah, that's another wee project. I'm going to move on. All these other pictures are wonderful too, but that's got special connections to me. So that's something. So our inclusive communities approach, you can see here, has a variety of different aspects which work both ways. If we were given the opportunity, we would talk about this in a lot more detail, but unfortunately we would be here all day, I think, because Max and I have a lot to talk about for all these things. So our focus today is going to be on three elements: social care, community volunteering, and can do. A little bit brief about can do, so you understand that it is a skills development programme for 16 to 35-year-olds with additional support needs, where people can build up on the skills that they've got, learn additional skills, and also give back to the community that's part of the project. So that's going to be our focus today. Max, you want to say anything else on that? No, you're fine. Right, I'm excited to go and tell you this. This picture is a picture of one of our residents in our supported living within Leonard Cheshire, and her name is Alison. Now this picture for me just shows the full project that we worked on, because the name of the project was Bringing Smiles and Friendship, and I just feel that her picture is contagious in every respect, and it just shows what the full project was about and what we managed to achieve, which was bringing smiles and friendships in a time that was a bit darker. So that is where we are. I also feel that our smile is quite contagious. There's lots of stories I'm going to tell you about this project throughout, and she's just amazing. That's one of our residents and she's amazing. So there we go. What we did, so what happened at the very beginning I've got here is the framework. So we keep people at heart, everything we do. All our values and approaches are in different sections here. For planning and helpful resources, how this project came about, we had an existing relationship with Glasgow Kelvin College, and I've got relationships with their services across Scotland. The lecturer who we had the relationship with had come to me and said, you know, how do we work together, Amanda? Because we used to do everything in person and that's not possible now. She spoke about how our students had been feeling quite isolated. They had volunteering as part of a project, they couldn't do it, and she was just feeling it for the students who were very isolated, were losing a lot of confidence and skills. And I had said, I'll leave it with me. So I'd put it in sort of the back burner, and then I had visited one of their supported living services where Alison lives, and I had went to the door and I was met by these two residents who I've had a relationship with in the past, and they weren't giving me the banter that they were usually, they weren't giving me the smiles. And that was no reflection of the staff that's there or anything. It was just a reflection of society at that time. And I'd come away thinking, you know, is there any way that we could bring Can Do and the supported living together? And I'd had a conversation with the lecturer, and she was like, well, that sounds amazing. So for the planning, I learned a bit more about I knew the residents from dipping in and out, but I learned more about the residents and what they'd like, and would they like to come together and join forces with the Can Do programme. So we learned about the residents, we learned about the students. We done it separately. We worked on skills, that because it was a bit frightening maybe to meet someone, some strangers online. So we developed the skills there, and then we came together because we had a better understanding of each other. So we've got an example of how we learned about Gordon, who was our other resident. These are the kind of things that he liked. We developed it in pictures, so it was easier as well for the students to understand. So they would maybe see things like Netflix and have an instant connection to residents. There were barriers. Technology was a bit of a barrier sometimes. Laptops and cameras letting us down. But what I must say is the staff from the supported living was just amazing, and they thought about different ways to overcome all this. So it wasn't smooth sailing, but it was amazing how it turned out. Communication, sharing, learning ideas. Again, we planned it out to see when we were going to have these sessions, and we found out there was going to be a birthday during this time. So we sent out birthday packs to everyone so we could celebrate together and just have fun and put smiles on people's faces. We learned Makaton. We introduced ourselves using that. We had various partners and people were involved in the project. We had a trip to the zoo together, Five Sisters Zoo. So this is Adam here holding up at Tenrec, which me I had a slight discomfort at one point and decided to bite him. So that was the entertainment of everyone because we all laughed. Poor Adam was getting slightly bit by the Tenrec and we were all laughing, but he was fine and the Tenrec was fine. I need to add that. Communities, connections and networks. We connected into a drama group, we learned skills and built our confidence. It says be a volunteer. Our community volunteer coordinator for the area, she came in, she spoke about what volunteering is like, the difference it's made. She's also learning about the services in Can Do as well, so that was good for us all to come together. The difference that involvement makes. Here's various different words and quotes that we've got from people. And a poster that was produced by Alison, one of our residents, how it made her feel being involved, but we'll go into that later on, so don't worry about the size. And then me and my role. So there's various roles within this. There were the residents, the support workers, myself, the coordinator, the lecturer, the various different students. But do you know what? Together we were all participants, because at that time, everyone was going through a dark period of not knowing what the future held, or we were all feeling a bit isolated and stuff. So we were very much all participants there. So the other thing I need to mention is the difference involvement makes and the roles. This interchanged at one point. So what people's role were at the beginning changed during it. And an example is Alison. So she's in our supported living. So she's very much in receipt of support. But what happened in this project, she became the person that gave support to the young people. So she checked in on them. And she would say, like, if they turned up different, their hair was different or whatever, or they looked tired, she wasn't shy to be saying someone was missing, that she'd like to come on, make sure everyone was there who was there the week before and why weren't they there. So she was very much about checking in on the students and making sure that they were all right. And they loved that, because some of them were in the house on their own because their parents were out working or whatever, and they weren't seeing many people. So to have that connection to someone was really good during the project. So this was Alison's poster that she made with her support worker about how being part of the project made her feel. So we've got this staying at home. We're all staying at home, and the feelings that Alison shared were very similar right across the board for the students and our residents, feeling scared, worried, uncertain what the future would hold. We learned skills, that's Alison there. We learned skills of saying her name, introducing herself, using Makaton. And that was a bit scary to begin with as well, because people are a bit shy. Are people going to judge when you make mistakes? But it ended up being fun, and everyone got involved, and we were all confident to say our name and introduce ourselves. As you can see, it was all done online. This is Alison's screen. She enjoyed it and it made her happy. So the feelings here expressed are completely different about the idea of staying at home. So being part of that gave her good feelings. There's pictures here of a forest walk and a virtual walk. We used videos from YouTube to go on these virtual walks, and we touched in on our senses. How did that make us feel? What were the things that we could maybe experience if we were on this walk? So it was a bit of escapism during a time that we couldn't escape, or we'd all love to have escaped. Oh, if I went back instead of forward, my goodness. Here we go. Difference involving me is some quotes from people during the project and at the end of the project. The poster in the middle is the poster that the students produced themselves to say how it meant to them. My favourite is the one that says, "It gave me a reason to put my best shirt on." So Gordon was our other resident and had sort of lost the reason to put his best shirt on or to get up in the morning because he had no reason to. We weren't going anywhere, so that gave him that. There's one of the students had said it gave them a reason to get out of bed in the morning because they didn't want to be seen in their bed. So I'm sure that had a good rippling effect on the family that the student was out of bed. But just other comments from various different people that were involved. Okay. So we are working towards and using the national framework. Maxine, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, just what you said, just to echo what you said, Amanda, it's very much around, you know, that bit where you're talking about the importance of involving people and how best to capture the difference that's been made. As part of that, we're absolutely looking at and centred on the National Performance Framework for Scotland, and in telling that story of the difference that's been made.
Okay, so again, just reflecting back on the framework that we are using, we were pulling our learning from that project right through using this framework. So regarding communication, sharing, learning ideas, we had to be very agile during the project. It wasn't how we'd worked in the past. So what ways was best for communicating? Was it by text messages, messengers, Teams, Zoom? What was best for everyone involved? And we had to learn and go as we did. People and partnerships are vital to us. Just wouldn't work without us. It connects us all. The connections map we are working on, and it's very much about people, bringing people together and the impact that they can have. Communities right across, that might be communities of interest, practice, and there might be communities within communities. So for us, it's about connecting and sharing with other people as well. The difference involvement makes, what we learned from that is, as an organisation, we can share the work that we do and it might help other things. So working with our services meant that we could have an impact on the care inspectorate, which we probably never thought about in the past. And that has a massive difference. And we fed that back to the students and the influence that they were having. And obviously we fed back to the residents as well. So yep, it was good. And what the other thing is, we're working with the Variation Scotland on a project to have a time to stop and think about what our work was like, how can we learn what was good and what was not so good, so we can take that forward in different projects that we do. Various different roles there that make our communities and make our projects that happen just the way they are and how they're connected, but most important for us to keep people at the heart, because it's people we're working with. It's not stats or anything like that, it's real people. I've left planning and helpful resources to the end, but that's, for us, that's the beginning, but it's also the end, but it's also all the way through what we do. So sometimes we think we've got a plan in place, and sometimes we need to go back and reflect, and sometimes at the end we're then planning for the next project because we've enjoyed it so much, or it needs to adapt. And the helpful resources, we share resources certainly amongst our partners, and then we also look for resources that might be better for us. So that's where we are at, and we continue to be. Max, are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some really creative ways as well, Amanda, that you're really, you know, and the team are embedding that too, and that Scottish Government initiative around learning from partnership working that you're sharing this yep. Project with is really exciting. And
we're sharing it with you guys today, so hopefully it's good as well. Let's see if I can go forward. Right. So we just thought this graphic was quite good. A network approach to involving people. We've taken the approach that if we can excite life in every aspect, then it continues and it ripples and it has this positive impact. We've had projects, we've had sessions, we've had meetings where I wish I could bottle the energy that's occurred because I've met someone else and they've felt something or they've got a connection. So I just think this graphic sort of shows how we are coming together and we're building our networks, and we're building our, yeah, we're just being strength, and we're just buzzing off each other. That's kind of what it is. And I know this sounds a bit cheesy, but we want to be with people that make you buzz and that make you excited, because that ripples through into all the different people that we're working with. And sometimes it's the people we're working with, the residents, that give you the buzz, the students that give you the buzz, or watching the two of them interact can be the time that gives you the buzz. And certainly the days that we had sessions for this project were the highlights of my week. And then when things were going a bit difficult. So just a quick quote here: sometimes the greatest adventure is simply a conversation. Can do in the past, before the pandemic, was maybe about making a difference to community, was thought to be quite big, but this project was based on conversations, because we never met each other in person. And sometimes it was, we came onto the screen together and we spoke about what was our favourite music, and we played it in the background, or we done a bring and tell, people brought things to the screen and we had conversations about things that made us happy, and just conversations led to other things. And I think for us, the important thing for myself and the lecturer at that point was to make people smile, people who were involved in the project, because it obviously, the residents had had an impact on me, the students had had an impact on the lecturer, so we wanted to just make people smile. That smile didn't stop there though. What we found out was that people were going to their beds happier, they were getting up happier, they were having a better relationship with their support staff, so that was having a rippling effect just from a positive conversation. So we're just going to end it here, but Max and I are opening the doors for conversations, and just saying that if you want to keep the conversation going with us, there's email addresses there. There is a little blog that was taken from myself just on that hyperlink there, and it tells the story of how the project came about, and it shows Alison's wonderful smiling picture again, which I absolutely love. You can check more out about Leonard Cheshire on their website, and you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Leonard Cheshire in Scotland if you want to check out other work that we do, because there's loads of other stuff happening in Scotland as well. And that's it really. Thank you. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much. From a very passionate Amanda, it was oozing out of you. Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's absolutely lovely to hear people beam about the impact of, and you didn't even do it face to face, it was online, and it's just fantastic. Thank you very much. We don't really have any time for questions, but if you've got questions as we go along, you can put them in the chat, and if we've got an extra couple of minutes at the end, we can ask. But certainly we'll be putting up the presentations on the website as well, so you can go on and you'll be able to get all their contact details on the website. I'm now going to hand over to Janis McDonald, who's recently, she's left Deaf Scotland, and if I got that right, Deaf Scotland, and is now with the Alliance. Janis is going to share with us the importance of communication, inclusiveness, and exploring different forms of communication that we as intergenerational practitioners should be considering and be aware of when we're connecting the generations. Now, Janis is going PowerPoint free. So Janis, here you go. Thank you.
I'm from the older generation. I can do without the stress of the extra digital challenges. However, what I wanted to do was to make a point, really, that many of us communicate in different ways. And actually, PowerPoint is quite a good thing, because many people who can't hear so well like the visual cues that PowerPoint and other things bring up. So if I did have PowerPoint, I could still probably make the same point, but it might not have the same impact, because you'll have seen the visual cues from the work that Amanda showed you earlier. I don't have in-depth things to show you in that sense. What I wanted to do, be in the kind of meat in the middle of this sandwich, is to try and highlight that maybe what makes us human is around communication. I haven't left Deaf Scotland so much as we were merged with the Alliance. We've created a new Scottish Sensory Hub, which is a more strategic intervention across deafness and sight loss, bearing in mind that one of the biggest issues that Scotland will face going forward is the ageing population. Why is that such a big interest to us? That would be because actually deafness and vision loss is generally quite age related. There are people who start off their lives with deficits, but there are many more who collect loss and deficits along the way. And just from an example of hearing loss, around about age 40% of the population will have some sort of loss. Around about age 60, that would be 60%. And when you get to 75 and over, that would be 90%. So as you age, the chances of your hearing not being so good are maybe enhanced, or the problems are enhanced if your sight's not so good either. So we're interested in finding ways to bridge together the deafness and vision loss, partly because we think people will need to stay and work longer, and workplaces will need to change how communication works for their staff. But also we see from the other end of the spectrum that there's maybe about 4,000 deaf children in Scotland. They find it really hard to get interviews, to get jobs. They find it really hard to get on for higher and further education. And a lot of that problem is to do with the communication barriers that they face. When we look at people who are deafblind, I'm not going to go there very much because we've already got a speaker about that. But the likelihood of deafblind people being employed and staying in employment is much more problematic. So on that spectrum of communication loss, there are various combinations. So what we could see from the deaf lens, for example, was that people who are sign language users don't necessarily understand other people's barriers. They don't necessarily understand what it's like to have tactile communication. They don't necessarily understand what it's like to be in an environment that you really need space and time to hear better, with hearing loops and microphones and all those sorts of things. So in 20 minutes, I'm not going to be able to get in-depth deaf and sensory awareness loss over. But what I can say is, from a human rights perspective, it struck me very early on when I started this job that sensory deprivation is a form of torture. And in human rights parlance, then that's a huge no-no, isn't it? And in reality, when faced with the impact of sensory loss, it is often very coupled with not so good health and well-being. Sign language users have a terrible prognosis, don't live nearly as long lives as other people, partly because they don't get good quality information in the right language, and partly because they don't get the levels of care and support that you would expect. So, for example, it might take 2.5 years for someone to have some sort of mental health intervention. We say the average is about 18 months to 2.5 years. For deaf people, it can be 20 and 30 years. And we can see over that space of time that the quality of intervention isn't very good, because actually 90% of that time will be missed appointments where there's not been the right communication and language support in place. I was just seeing there's huge issues just now with paediatric audiology in NHS Lothian, and on average in Britain it's 109 days from birth screening to cochlear implant or interventions for our babies who are identified as deaf. In Scotland it would appear to be 4.5 years. Now, I'm going to labour on that point because actually the first 5 years of any child's life is critical. The first 3 years is even more critical. And if you've not got the right access to communication and development of your words and things, then that's going to impact you very significantly for the rest of your life. And in my view, it fits with that notion of rights-based trauma. What is the state's role in changing some of that, and how do the citizens work? So in my mind, the important thing is citizens work for each other all the time. A lot of our people with sensory loss are relying on people in a day-to-day way. Simple things, getting through door entry systems, being maybe assisted across the road, and you know, just things about navigating your way around buildings or supermarkets and all that sort of thing. Those minor interventions, those abilities to communicate are really quite significant, particularly when you have this, the impact often of hearing and sight loss is a lack of confidence, a less ability to navigate around the world, less ability to assert yourself and your needs. I'm going to sort of take a slightly different direction in terms of understanding some of the issues that our young people face, particularly just now with the masks and the screens and all the things that are around with the COVID. They really kind of highlight some of the barriers that are faced. And if our young people are not understanding what the teacher and their social group are saying, then they're even less able to soak in all that information that young people normally do as sponges. So my plea is not to forget those communication barriers and what we mean by inclusive communication. I'm going to start off by saying to separate out accessible information from inclusive communication. They're not the same thing. So maybe if you're putting information out in BSL or in symbols, in a variety of community languages, in plain English, in animations, whatever, to understand that they will all have different target audiences. So if we don't get accessible information, first of all, then it makes it much more difficult to have meaningful communication. And you need to have sort of informed choice, you need to have informed thoughts and conceptualization. So the importance of accessible information cannot be underlined enough. And again, I'm going to use COVID as a big example of how the state suddenly realized that it wasn't regularly communicating with all its citizens in the right way, at the right time, with messages that they could understand. You know, and if you're a BSL user, add 6 weeks to the normal train of things, because it normally will take people about 6 weeks once a piece of information or something has been decided that needs to be communicated to go through the process of commissioning it and delivering it in different languages and things. So the whole way of thinking around how you're going to work with people means that you've maybe got to turn some things that you're doing around a wee bit. If you want to communicate in the same way at the same time with everybody, then you've got to have the work prepared before you launch your initiative, and not launch your initiative and then figure out how people are going to catch up. And I hope I'm making sense. I see some heads nodding. I'm going to say one other thing and then pause to see if there are a couple of questions, because for me it's probably just as important to try and capture notions of getting the right information to people that are in the room. It strikes me that inclusive communication is much more of a process. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I can order my goods online with Argos, but if I need to change the delivery date, I can only phone. The inclusion is there at the start and the intention's honourable, but the process isn't followed through and it hasn't been tested appropriately. It's similar quite often. You can order a lot of things, tickets for the theatre and things online now. But actually, if you go to have to make any changes, then you have to phone. And often with phone helplines, there are no other alternatives. There's no chat, there's no email, there's no video links, which makes it all quite difficult. COVID has started to, I think, help people understand that the various channels are required. And in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more private, public and third sector moves towards being more BSL literate, being more symbols literate, and being more aware of various channels, not depending on helplines and the telephone all the time. So I did say I was going to shut up at that point and maybe take a question or two. Is there anybody game for a question?
Do you know what I find quite interesting, Janis, is that I've grown up with people who use sign language. I'm not the best on it, I must admit, but when I've spoke to others, it almost feels like oh, that's not my thing, like I don't need to learn that, whereas actual fact, I feel that we should be learning it from a young age, so we've got different tools to speak to others. And the example that I use, which is probably a bit crude, is I would love to be able to sign to someone at the bar that I wanted a drink. I can't shout that in a loud pub, but imagine having, that's how I use this as an example to say, well, sign language could become useful. Like, imagine really saying that to someone else. That could be your thing. And they'll laugh at me, but I think, how good is it to be able to just go and use a different communication tool? Because it is your life, it is part of that. It's not, oh, I don't need it, so I don't need to learn it. Why don't we learn it from a young age?
You could probably, drink
I know.
It's a pint or wine.
Yeah.
You would be surprised at actually how easy it can be to make the transition. And what I would say is I entirely agree, again, on the principle of universality that we heard about earlier. Then I think we should understand that babies can mirror and they can sign before they can speak. And in many ways, the society has learned that out of people, that some people are much more expressive with their hands and things than others. And it's probably that legacy of the fact that probably quite a long time ago, before our language got so sophisticated, that we did grunt and point and sign a lot more than we do at the moment. In fact, we're told that that's rude. Yeah. And in many ways then, you know, we see the different cultures between sign language users and others, and maybe, you know, an increasing lack of understandings. I talk about intellectual masturbation normally when I'm doing my talks, because sometimes I do think that there's a bit of, some people have to ascertain that they're maybe smarter than others, or, you know, there's a bit about being an elite professional and using a set of words that is very limiting in that sense. And you know, one of these women that was brought up in a council house in Alloa, and just go, for me, it's quite easy to bulldoze through that and say, look, I'm sorry, I have absolutely no clue what you are talking about, and say that. But in many ways, society drives that out of us. We're taught to be polite and accepting and whatever. I think maybe what we've got to do is to think about what being polite means and what accepting what means, and rethinking some of the communication norms that we have, so that it's not seen as different groups sort of trying to distinguish themselves and as part of their community, but how we bridge build between them. You know, a lot of what you talked about in terms of your connections and your bridge building and your building on things and having fun while you're doing it would chime very much with what we would do. Claire, I see you've got a...
I have. Hi, Janis. I've written quite a lot of notes down from you speaking, so you've given us some ideas. I think it's really important that as we start to open our doors in our community centres, that we really consider communication. And I've written down that we need to get some posters out in our entrance hall that have got symbols and words, because we've had to change the layout of our community space. So you've given me some really good good advice about what we can do to help people. But just going on about the point about sign language, I'm really interested in learning some basic sign language so that I can say hello to people and try and help out as much as possible. But it's really, really hard to find accessible courses in the community. They cost a lot of money. What are your ideas around that? What can we do to make learning sign language easier for people, Makaton or BSL?
Well, what I would say, 2 or 3 things in response to what you've said. First of all, yes, we can navigate our way around the world on symbols, through railway stations, through bus stations, through airports, and yet it's quite difficult to find consistent signs for toilets in Scotland. And sometimes I've had to look twice to make sure I'm going in the right one, because the signs are so vague or modernist or whatever. So I think a consistent set of symbols would be a good thing. And I think with that also comes that notion that we will all pick up sign. If we all produce things in sign more often, then we'll automatically pick up bits of it. It's not that expensive in most colleges will run a sign language course, normally from about August. They're usually signing up people in August for starting September, October time through. Most of the sensory services that are out there will run courses at some point, normally out with the sort of schools program type thing. But the difficulty is people don't generally budget for these things. I would say, as part of the notion of the BSL Act, was to actually promote and support the language, not just because a lot of people want to do it and it would be a nice thing to do, but actually it would make all our lives a lot easier trying to communicate in Marks and Spencer's on a Saturday afternoon, or across the road from each other, and in lots of different ways. It would, it's not just about another tool in the toolbox. BSL is another language. And actually, I think sometimes when you see some of the difficulties some immigrants have when they come to Scotland, then being able to learn English and BSL might not be a bad thing, because one bridges to the other, just the way that sign and mirroring bridges babies into spoken and more developed language. So my thinking is, actually, we leave school with language qualifications. We should have to find a way to leave school with communication qualifications, because it's central to the workplace in a way that language isn't necessarily. We can get through a lot of jobs in the workplace with symbols and sign and stuff if we really tried. So I think there's a bit about, I'm old enough to remember days before we had accessible toilets. I remember people saying that's going to cost a lot of money, you'll never get that here. And now you wouldn't see a public space without one. And when we've stopped talking about accessible toilets, we want changing places. The thinking and the wants and the needs have moved on. I would say we're at the very early doors of that with communication accessibility. We haven't really understood the panel principles. How do people influence their own care plans or their own children's plans or their own community plans if we are not enabling that communication to happen? And it doesn't happen automatically for people. And yet I see plans that come out of government, come out of council, come out of health boards day and daily, where the communication's assumed. It's implied, it's implicit. And if it's not explicit, then it's not funded. And we had to fund accessible toilets, we had to fund ramps, we've had to fund bridges, we've had to change environments. I'm suggesting that you're right, Claire, we need to change the environments now that we're we're recovering from COVID, and be much more mindful of communication and actually build things like hearing loops into new builds. Don't wait till the building's done and then retrofit it. No, think about things differently. I've probably gone over time, Alison.
Thanks, Janice.
Just by a minute, that's fine. Thank you very much, Janice, for a very thought-provoking talk, which has got us all thinking. Our last set of speakers join us from Deafblind Scotland. I know that we are running late, so I'm hoping that everybody's able to stay for another 10 minutes. Ruth Hart and Adam Lodge will be sharing information about the Touching Lives project, where deafblind people delivered training to increase awareness of how to recognise and support dual sensory impairment, encouraging inclusive communities and partnership working. Over to you, Ruth and Adam.
Yeah. Thanks, Alison. Hi there. I'm Ruth Hart, and this is my colleague Adam. We're sitting right next to each other, but we're on different screens. We're just we'll try and keep it as condensed as we can to keep the time. I'm just going to share our presentation. Share screen. There we go. Everybody see that okay? Yes. Cool. So Adam and I both work on a couple of projects, and the main one that we work on is the Right to Dream, the Dare to Dream project. And this has been funded by the Equality and Human Rights Commission for us to be able to gather a group of deafblind ambassadors who have, we've done training on empowerment, self-confidence, things like this, and listening skills, so that they can learn how to go out and consult with the wider deafblind population across Scotland, and really ensure that one of their biggest things they've been doing at the very beginning of the project is putting together a manifesto, which is the wording that they came up with, of deafblind people's rights. And that manifesto has become the base of our organisational 5-year plan that will be launched at our AGM later this year, and then which has also then influenced a new policy influencing plan, so that we've made sure that deafblind people of all ages have been at the start of all of the processes that are coming up, and really ensuring that each individual person is at the centre of everything that we're going to do and go forward. So I'll give you these slides will be shared with you, so I'm not going to talk through them all. I've just introduced you to the project. When we were doing a kind of consultation with other deafblind people, we ensured that the deafblind people that were in the core group, the ambassadors, had enough training and confidence to be able to go out and have one-on-ones with deafblind people, or do Zoom calls with them, do it via email, face-to-face, in every which way and whatever type of communication that was needed. And then that group then brought all those results together and formed their manifesto. Couple of the things that we asked, I'll just skip past those just now. So this is the manifesto of deafblind people's rights that they all agreed on, these 5 points. And there's a link at the bottom there for the YouTube video that they created in sign language and BSL and audio described. If you're interested to have a look at that, it's very short, but it's you really hear it coming from the hearts of deafblind people. So that's the Right to Dream project that Adam and I both work on. Adam also works in the Touching Lives project, and this is where we'll kind of hopefully try to get a little bit of interaction with you, help build your awareness a bit, give you a little insight into some of the awareness training that we do across the whole of society, every aspect, from going into schools to going to Network Rail and things. I won't say more. I'll let Adam take over there.
No, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, so the Touching Lives projects, to try and make it as basic and as simple as possible, is we go to, or sorry, it's virtually at the moment, but we would be going to organizations, but organizations ranging really from, say, nurseries to care homes, a range of generations that get involved in this training sessions. But also we have like a range of generations who are the trainers. So the trainers are deafblind. I am facilitating these meetings. I lead kind of peer-led training sessions with our trainers so they can understand other types of deafblindness. So it's not just that they're talking about their own deafblindness, they're talking about in general terms. But we like to tailor each session to the organization. So for example, if it is to a nursery, we do, as it's been said, we like to say how sign language, deafblind manual, any form of communication kind of should be taught in primary school at an early age, because kids absorb this information. And when we do get teachers involved in these sessions, we always tell them, well, we're doing as much as we can right now to push this, but we need your voice as well to get involved. And I'm not saying that it's not working, we just need more voices and eventually we will be heard, but I don't know how long we have been saying that. I've only been doing this project for about 2 years, and fingers crossed things will change. But the Touching Lives is all about upskilling the staff. So anyone can meet a deafblind person. If a taxi driver, for example, is taking a deafblind person into the car, we want to tell the taxi driver how to guide someone into the car. So as I said, this training session is for anyone. It's 2 hours long. So if you just go on to the next slide. One of the first questions we ask at the start of each session is, who knows the definition of deafblindness? And it's quite interesting to say, because majority of the time is, well, someone's deaf and blind. They can't see and they can't hear. But that's not right. It's an impairment. So they can slightly see and they can slightly hear, depending on the percentage of vision and hearing. There's about 3% of the population within Scotland who are deafblind, who don't see or hear anything. So as you can see on the screen, I'll read it, but it's a distinct disability arising from a dual sensory loss of severity that makes it hard for impaired senses to compensate for each other. And then the next slide. Then we get kind of more personal, because it's different trainers for each session. They talk about when they got diagnosed, how it happened, who was there to support them. Now it's different for each trainer because there's different ages. So one of our trainers is in his late 20s, early 30s, and he talks about the time when he got diagnosed and there was people around him that were supporting him. He got told about places like Deafblind Scotland, for example. He wasn't left in the dark. But there's trainers who are, say, in the 80s, who were diagnosed, let's say, in the 1960s. And there was no one around them. They were literally left in the dark to, okay, well, there's nothing we can do, bye, and that's it. And it's, when you hear those sort of stories, it's the emotional impact, is listening to the lived experience of this person. And that's why it's more of a conversational based training session. It's to just make people aware that people have gone through life changes, and it's more of a bereavement of such, like they've lost something and how they've dealt with it. If they weren't born with it, like you kind of need to treat someone not differently, but kind of understand it and wanting to understand it. Like, I think it's empathy is probably key in a certain way, but I won't go into too much detail in that. And then I'm just going to show you an example of a type of video we show organizations to kind of see if they notice any difficulties a deafblind person may find in any scenarios. So in this scenario, what we're about to show you is a deafblind person approaching a bridge. Now, once we play this video, if I can ask everyone if it's possible to either in the chat box, just write the hazards that you kind of see, or after the video, if you put your hand up or just shout out what hazards you see. But I'll play the video now.
Let me stop share and then start a new share.
And you should see in the screen right now, just a person approaching steps towards a bridge. Is that playing for anyone?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I missed the first
one. I'm hoping it's not too laggy, but you might be able to see with the pictures with the person walking up the steps, a few objects, but also the elements may be an issue as well.
Yeah. I'll try it from the beginning again just to see if you can see the bit you missed.
Yeah, we'll just play it one more time. Yeah, so we pause the screen here. It may be best for you just to kind of look at the image itself. I'm gonna probably see what Nika has said here. So debris on the ground and objects. Yeah, there's lots of debris. We can see there's leaves to the left of the wall or to the right of the wall there, just before the steps. So if a deafblind individual is going to approach these steps, they're going to walk straight into these leaves. As you step on the steps, you want to see, and actually I think was it Maxime who said something there?
Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. No, it was Charlie. The steps look wet. Yeah, before filming here, it was slightly cloudy. It was damp in the air, so the floor was wet. So yeah, could cause slips. And then I think Maxime said here, handrails at the bottom of the stairs, difficult to see. There's only handrails on the right side. Some reason there's no handrails on the left side. So again, that is a hazard. And then, yeah, again, rubbish on the ground and the elements, again, it's foggy. And as you approach the steps, you can see there's some discoloring on the steps. Usually that should be bright yellow to help people with visual impairments. And I don't know if it's been mentioned, but you've probably seen an iron brew bottle on the ground there as well. It's quite narrow, the space. So if someone was going to be walking towards you, before you know the person with visual impairments, it might be too late for them, so they may have to squeeze by. Again, that may be difficult depending if there's a guide dog involved as well. There was a few comments in there, but I'm just going to make sure, does anyone want to say anything out loud before I move on to the next video?
Any hands? No, no hands.
No, that's fine. We'll get the next video up.
What one is it?
So the next video will be, so we're going to see someone with visual and hearing impairments, a deafblind individual with a guide dog, outside a train station, approaching to go inside. And again, I'm going to ask if you can see the difficulties for this person. I'm hoping it's not going to be laggy. But again, in the chat box, or again, feel free to say anything. Let me know what you see. So on audio, describe it slightly for you. So right now you can see the individual with his guide dog walking outside. In this scenario, it's Dundee train station. And it's quite a bright day with some markings on the ground. And the cameraman is walking backwards into the train station. And the deafblind individual is now walking through the automatic doorway into the train station itself. So you can notice right now, he's scanning the room for any hazards he may see. It's quite a large room, so he's able to walk freely inside. And now he's trying to find where to go. His guide dog has probably not been here before, so he's not too sure where to go either. But if you notice something in this video, no one approaches this person. There's even a worker walking straight by. But he's walking around looking quite confused. And because it was filmed in the COVID era, there's lots of one-way systems as well. So he's approached a sign there which says no entry, but he's seeing it as soon as he got up to the sign. He's at the moment trying to find a lift to get down to the platform. And before he gets to the lift, he actually sees there's escalators, and now he's moving to the lift and he's able to get into the lift and go downstairs. On my screen, that was quite laggy. So if anyone wasn't able to point out any hazards, I can happily point them out right now. Was that quite laggy for everyone? Just to double check. Just nodding. So in this scenario, in kind of most train stations, annoyingly, it's very bright. There's glass all around these buildings. I don't know if anyone's recently been to Queen Street. As nice as that is, there's still lots of sunlight which gets in, which again, that's good. It makes it cheaper to run, I guess, but it's not ideal for people with visual impairments. Also, if you notice that there's the times for all the trains was right next to the window. So if someone is going to look up, the sunlight is directly into their eyes. So again, that's going to daze them. I've just noticed the time, so I'm glad I was able to give a snippet of our training, and that was actually for Network Rail, which we did that for, to point out how they can improve their stations. But I was glad I was able to get that little bit out for you.
If you could just say one of the take homes from using those kind of videos, and for you guys to have seen it, is to think if there was a couple of people, members of public or staff, who had gone through some of the awareness training or learned about the sign language, they could see by the dog that he's got a visual impairment. The dog had red and white, which indicates deafblind. So if there had been someone there to just give him a bit of direction, that particular deafblind person does have some hearing, so he would be able to have a conversation. But because he has tunnel vision, he's not able to see, because if somebody walks right in front of him, he doesn't notice it until they're right in front of them. So yeah, our hope is that by using the deafblind trainers and getting to all these, like, as a varied amount of society organizations, the awareness is raised, and then deafblind people get to live much more freely and in a much more accessible world, with communication, inclusive communication. But yeah, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Sorry it's gone over.
Thank you both very much. I think one of the questions is where can people go to get more information and more training? And if you've got training courses, could I ask the speakers to send Bella or myself, it's just Alison@generationsworkingtogether.org, Send us your information and we'll send it out to the delegates. We will be sending out evaluation forms so we can send out other information. And I also think it would be really nice, we will be going on to social media and letting people know that these presentations are up and able for people to download. So we will be promoting the work that you've done this afternoon as well. So from me, thank you very much for everybody, for the speakers to take the time to come along today and take the time to prepare the sessions, for everybody who attended. I hope you've enjoyed the afternoon. It's been quite a short afternoon, but it's been really good. It's been really interesting. I've found it really inspiring. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again, maybe tomorrow night or Wednesday or Thursday. And if it's your only day that you're coming, thank you for coming. Please stay in touch with us, with the team, and we look forward to hearing so many great stories about more intergenerational connection in the community. Thank you all very much. Thank you again. Thank you.